Sunchokes. They're a prepper and permaculture super plant. Search them up on YouTube and you'll find hundreds of videos about this amazing survival food. They spread aggressively, produce massive yields, survive harsh climates, and they don't require you to lift a finger. There is one issue though. Before you blow a hole in the back of your spiky battle leathers, let's do some experiments. We're going to look at how to grow them, why they mess with your digestion, and I'm going to test out 3 different ways to cook them, hopefully so you can get the calories without the chaos. Sunchokes are native to the eastern United States. Native Americans were thought to have obtained the plants from the valleys of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, and then they began spreading and cultivating them for sustenance. They called the plants sunroots, as they have bright yellow flowers, and they're in the sunflower family. Now they're referred to as not only sunchokes, but you'll also hear them called Jerusalem artichokes, wild potatoes, horse potatoes, and diabetic potatoes. Sunchokes were introduced into parts of Europe in the 1600s as an agricultural crop. It fell out of favor when the potato became more of a staple. Sunchokes fell by the wayside until World War II in Europe. Much of the food grown there was requisitioned by Nazis, but no one wanted the sunchokes. So they were survival food for many, but became synonymous with war and hunger. Sunchokes can handle serious winters. Unlike potatoes that turn to mush if they freeze in the ground, sunchokes are perfectly happy staying in the soil all winter long. So the earth is your root cellar. These are a great plant to have around during the late winter and early spring when everything else has stopped producing. They don't need a ton of water. I grow them in a place that gets about 12 inches of precipitation a year, and none of it happens in the summer. I have a little drip line on them, and I water them about twice a week. They don't need much. They can also deal with part shade. They're great for those little corners of the yard where nothing else seems to want to grow. And the yield? You can get anywhere from 1 to 5 pounds of tubers per square foot. That's huge. You don't weed them, you don't fertilize them. In fact, the biggest problem people have with sunchokes is getting rid of them. If you leave a tiny piece of tuber in the ground the size of a pea, it will grow back next year. For a resilience garden, that's exactly what we want. We want a crop that fights for its life. So you have this amazing abundant food source, but then you eat it and you regret everything. Why? If you just roast these up like a potato, you're gonna have a bad time. People call them fartichokes for a reason. But here's the thing, that issue is actually solvable by understanding a little bit of science. We're not going to get super into the weeds of biochemistry here, but we do need to understand one word, inulin, not insulin, inulin. Most root vegetables, like potatoes, store their energy as a starch. Our bodies are great at breaking down starch into simple sugars. We have the enzymes for it, and boom, energy. Sunchokes are different. They store energy as inulin. Here's the kicker. Humans physically cannot digest inulin. We lack the enzyme to cut those chains apart. The recommended maximum daily intake of inulin for humans before we start to have those bad effects is about 10 grams. Just half a cup of sunchokes has about 18 grams of inulin. So there's a bit of a problem there if you're trying to use these as a survival crop. When you eat a raw or roasted sunchoke, that inulin passes right through your stomach and small intestine completely untouched. It lands in your large intestine where your gut bacteria are waiting. And your gut bacteria? They love inulin. They go into a feeding frenzy and they ferment that fiber rapidly. And the byproduct of that fermentation is gas. A lot of it. That's it. It's not bad for you, it's just your gut biome throwing a party that's a little too loud for the neighbors. And by neighbors, I mean the poor soul who has to be in the same room as you. Now, interestingly, this is actually a health benefit in moderation. It feeds those good gut bacteria. But if you aren't used to it, or if you eat a pound of these things, it can be incredibly painful. So does that mean we shouldn't eat them? No, it just means that we need to process them correctly. Here are the 3 ways that I tried to break down that inulin before it hit my stomach. And then I rated each of these based on deliciousness, which I think is really important, level of gas, and also cramps that it caused. Now, this is not super scientific. The sample size is just 1, me, so take it all with a grain of salt. Method 1, acid boil. That sounds hardcore, but it's actually simple. Acid, like lemon juice, breaks those chemical bonds in the inulin chain. So I peeled the chokes and cut them into small chunks. Then I covered them in a mixture of half water and half lemon juice. And then I boiled it all for 15 minutes. The taste? It's okay. These are kind of mushy and quite lemony. Mid, as my kids would say. I think if I did an extra cooking step and either fried these up or turned them into a soup, they would be better. Gas? I was still gassy. Not as bad as some of my previous experiments with sunchokes, but I was not fit for polite company. Stomach cramps? Surprisingly none. Acid does seem to have helped this quite a bit. Method number 2, the low and slow. If you cook sunchokes low and slow, it's supposed to break down that chain of inulin. This is something that I've seen posted a bunch on permaculture forums. Low and slow. So I decided to give it a shot. And my favorite way of cooking low and slow is dehydrating. So I tossed them in some olive oil with salt and herbs. Then I put them in the dehydrator for 12 hours at 165 degrees, and it turned these nice and crispy. The texture was similar to a dried plantain, really nice and snackable. This was by far my favorite flavor of the things I tried. I scarfed these down. Unfortunately, this method of cooking didn't seem to break those inulin chains at all. Gas? Oh Lord. Stomach cramps? Yes. Also, please pour one out for my husband. I decided to undertake this experiment on Valentine's weekend, thinking that all 3 methods would work great. Sometimes I wonder if he regrets having married an idiot. And finally, the gold standard, fermentation. If we don't have the enzymes to break down inulin, we can let the microbes do it for us outside of our bodies. I slice them thin, put them in a jar with a 3% salt brine, some dill and mustard seed, and let them sit on the counter for 2 weeks. The lactobacteria eat the inulin and they produce gas in the jar, so you can see the bubbles escaping. And what you're left with is a crunchy, tangy pickle that's much easier on the stomach. I did a video on fermentation a while back, so if that's your jam, this is a great candidate for it. Taste? It tastes like a fermented food. I like fermented foods. I don't want them to be the main staple of my diet, but they are tasty. Gas? Not nearly as much as the other 2 methods. And stomach cramps? None at all. Now, after I did all this work, I found a study on cooking methods to break down inulin. Of course, I didn't see this beforehand. I'm going to link it in the comments, but here are the main findings. I think we should pay particular attention to this first one. Inulin chemical stability decreases in an acidic environment at pH less than or equal to 4 due to the heating time and temperature increase. So basically, the longer you cook these in an acid, the easier they are going to be to digest. So, are sunchokes right for you? They're resilient, they're perennial, and once you understand the secret to unlocking the nutrients without the side effects, they can be a staple as part of a greater food system. Just make sure that you've got acidic foods on hand or you're used to fermenting. If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe and let me know in the comments what other perennial food crops you'd like to dig into. Until then, stay grounded and I'll see you next time.